Back during the dark ages of the 1990s, young Chris Miller stumbled upon an artifact that would become a lifelong obsession. Now, armed with a mind full of nostalgia and a basement full of comic books, Chris attempts to analyze the art and the artist that made him comics crazy.
Why this fool got more comics than a motherfucker?
Hey everyone, this is Chris Crazy House, and I'd like to welcome you all to a new episode of Comics Crazy. And when I was conceptualizing the season 2, I decided that I didn't want to just do flip-throughs of comic books. I actually wanted to do some flip-throughs of sketchbooks and art books that I have from popular comic book artists. And one in particular that I decided to start with is the Cliffhanger sketchbook. I figured that'd be a good start off for our sketchbook flip-throughs. If anyone remembers, in the late 90s, Wildstorm decided that they were going to do their own creator-owned imprint called Cliffhanger, and it was going to feature the hottest artists of that day doing their own creator-owned projects. I remember there being a lot of hype around this, and the comic book magazine of the time, Wizard, decided that they would do a little exclusive and showcase some of the conceptual art for these new Cliffhanger books. It's only a few pages long, but it has lots of good conceptual artwork and character artwork for the new books that are coming out. And since we will eventually get to those very first issues of the 3 main Cliffhanger books, Battle Chasers, Danger Girl, and Crimson, I decided this would be a good jump-off point for that. So let's take a look at the creative team, shall we? The creative team for this book, obviously, are the creators of each individual Cliffhanger book, starting off with Joe Madureira, who does Battle Chasers, and we have Humberto Ramos, who created Crimson, and lastly, we have J.Scott Campbell, who created Danger Girl. A little bit of insider knowledge that I got when I had a chance to sit in a talk with Humberto Ramos. He talked about the origins of the Cliffhanger imprint, and he was telling me that the original plan that Jim Lee and Wildstorm had for Cliffhanger were 3 popular artists of the time doing their own creative books, but the 3 artists that they had in mind was Joe Madureira, of course, J.Scott Campbell, which makes sense, and the last one was actually supposed to be Michael Turner. So that's who they wanted for the big 3 to kick off their Cliffhanger line. But there are some issues going on there behind the scenes where Michael Turner was already contracted to work with Top Cow on a lot of their books. If you were around back then, you realize just how popular Michael Turner was becoming back then. So it actually started partially a rift between Top Cow and Wildstorm, mostly with Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee at the time. So, Michael Turner never got a chance to work on a creator-owned Cliffhanger book, and they decided to slide Humberto Ramos into that spot. But that's what the situation was straight from Ramos's mouth. That's what he told us. He also kind of felt like because he was kind of slid in at the last minute of that whole situation, he kind of felt weird vibes from Jim Lee. He said he wasn't sure that Jim Lee actually liked him. But as time went on and Ramos proved himself as the most consistent artist of the 3, his books came out on a regular basis, Jim Lee warmed up to him a lot more. So just a little insider knowledge that I picked up at conventions talking to some of the artists out there. Once again, I don't know how the other 2 artists feel about that story, but that's the one that Ramos tells everybody. Anyway, let's get on to the flip through. So here we are, folks, with the exclusive Wizard sketchbook Cliffhanger. And I do have the original copy from 1997, but it is not in my pull boxes for some reason, which means it is probably on my bookshelf somewhere, probably in between some books or my graphic novel section, but I cannot locate it at this time. But good thing I found this copy from Trike's Comics Alley then thank you to them for supplying me with this copy. And this is the one that we're going to be looking at for this flip through. So as you can see here on the cover, it is really just a basic composite of some of the main characters from the books. You got the Red Hood from Crimson, you got Red Monica from Battle Chasers, and you got Sydney from Danger Girl. So 3 of the female characters from each book, and these girls were kind of like some of the signature characters from each book. And I think that's a good way to get people hyped up and interested as to what's going on with this sketchbook. So Wizard did a good job by picking these particular characters for this sketchbook. So we're going to peel it open and take a look at some of the original sketches for these Cliffhanger books. So kicking it off here with the Battle Chasers, that's the first one we're going to be looking at. It also has, I think, the least amount of actual drawings and sketches in here. But Joe Madureira was obviously the most popular artist at this time, doing work for Marvel on X-Men. And he was the one that everyone was highly anticipating this new book and this new venture for Wildstorm. And he decided that he was going to do a fantasy series. So we all know Joe Mad is very much inspired by not only anime, but anime fantasy, things like Lotus War. So for me, as a young man who was into anime and comics, I was eagerly anticipating what he was going to present in Battle Chasers. So we got the main character of Garrison, who is kind of like the swordsman, the loner swordsman, almost kind of like a traveling Ronin or samurai. And he's kind of retired at this point, but he is getting drawn back into the story. He's one of those type of characters where he's kind of like the reluctant hero. And we only get just a profile sketch of the character, but it looks cool, you know, but I would have loved to have seen a full body drawing of Garrison at this time. I thought that would have been a lot better because he's a very cool design character, and he's the quintessential design when it comes to Joe Mad style. Like, even if you look later on where he designs the artwork for Darksiders, he has a very unique style when it comes to drawing heroes, and Garrison fits that mold very much so. I'll post some other sketches of Garrison so that way you guys can get an idea if you've never seen it before, but I would assume most of the people here have seen how he looks. But so we also got the character of Nolan. So he's the old man wizard of the bunch. This is one of the things that I liked about Joe Mad back then and now, in that he would take archetypes, but he would also infuse some other things into it. So this is a wizard type character, but he doesn't look like Gandalf or he doesn't look like Merlin. He has his own aesthetic, but you can still see that this is a wizard type character just from the, like, you know, the mismatched shoes and, you know, the bald head and, like, you know, the old man look and the glasses. So this character is an archetype, but he has a different spin on it, and I appreciate that. We get on to the character of Gully, and she is the young girl character. She is one of the main characters that we see first in Battle Chasers, and, you know, her father was killed by the villains, and she possesses the gauntlets of Aramis, and those gauntlets give her invulnerability and super strength. They said, you know, how they described her was she has near Hulk level strength. The last character is the War Golem, Calibreto, and he is like the mech of the team, or the Battle Chasers. So even though he is, you know, peaceful in his personality, and he loves nature, and he loves being protective and taking care of things, he was built for war. And the fact that he is a creature that is actually banned in this particular fantasy world, like there's not supposed to be any more war golems anymore, that automatically puts him into conflict with a lot of the different creatures and characters in this world. You know, people wanted to exterminate him on sight, but he is, just basically a gentle giant. As far as the design goes, Joe Mad does a great job at drawing mechs. Once again, you see the anime influence in the way that it's drawn. And, you can't deny like how, even though it's a robot, he still puts his own spin on it. Like it's almost very steampunkish in the way that it's designed. I know there's another Cliffhanger comic called Steampunk, but this almost takes on like the steampunk, diesel punk aesthetic with the way that it's designed, even to the point where it has like, smoke and vents and stuff like that. So on the next page, we get some of the villains that were supposed to be in Battle Chasers. Spoiler alert, but none of these villains actually appear really in Battle Chasers, at least not in any of the 10 issues that I can think of. Maybe in some of the newer Battle Chasers that have come out recently, we see them, but for the most part, these things really don't actually exist in Battle Chasers. I'm almost wondering if Joe Mad was just, strapped for time, because he's working on the book and he's not known as being a fast artist. I'm wondering if he just grabbed whatever sketches he had in his sketchbook, gave it over to Wizard and said, yeah, this will be in Battle Chasers or whatever. Because, like I said, these characters don't appear. It's cool stuff, and it definitely gets you hyped for wanting to see what's going on with this book, because he has a great combination of organic and mechanical for a lot of these characters. Like, this flying mount here, you can see the little guy in there. He's holding a rifle, and he's kind of inside this kind of like mech machine, but it has legs and wings, almost like an organic creature. Seeing this, and I definitely don't remember seeing this guy. I was looking forward to seeing him in Battle Chasers. He looks badass. This looks like a really badass character design. And I was thinking this was going to be like one of the villains, or, maybe someone who's kind of like a counterpart to Garrison, someone who's going to fight Garrison. Now, Garrison does have some villains that look really cool in Battle Chasers, and we'll see those when we get to it. But this character in particular doesn't really appear. And of course, we got Red Monica. So Red Monica is the femme fatale of the Battle Chasers universe, and she was used as kind of like the signature cheesecake of the Battle Chasers universe as well. She was used on a lot of the marketing, on different covers. A lot of different artists would do their own spin on Red Monica at that time, I remember. And she was the eye catcher to get you in the door, basically. The fact that she was this very sexy bounty hunter, and she's not exactly a bad guy, but she's not a good character either. She kind of runs through that gray area, and sometimes she'll be on the hero side, sometimes she's on her own side, basically. So depending on who pays her and who gives her the money or what her goals are, that's where she goes off to. That's what side she jumps on. So you can't really trust her. Onward to Crimson. Now, Crimson was the concept that I was least looking forward to. However, it was the one that won me over. All right. I didn't, at the time, I didn't recognize who Humberto Ramos was by his artwork, but through this was kind of like my introduction to him. And then I kind of went back and found some of his artwork that he had done before this. And even now, I'm a big fan of his art style and the concepts that he puts into his work. So Crimson was the one that introduced me to him. And, it has very much so the 90s goth aesthetic. If you think of movies like Blade, or even if you look at the main character of Alex and his costume, is very reminiscent of Johnny Depp as Edward Scissorhands. So, it has that aesthetic. Both the style and the story of Crimson kind of maneuvers in that kind of underground or subversive art movements that we would see in bigger cities and in different cultures. So that's what I liked about it. It gave the whole concept a very different feel. So you got two of the other main characters, Ekimus and Joe the Indian. Joe the Indian is kind of like Alex's guide into this world of being a vampire. We get introduced to him here, and his design does change a bit. Like, once this is kind of the initial design, and even that for Ekimus is the initial design, but it changes a lot once you get to the actual book. But these are good first sketches to see what the characters look like, and you can even see that Ekimus without his long robe on, like you can see how his feet look, because he's not human, he's a pure vampire. So these are my favorite characters from the Crimson series, the Jelly Bats, and I just love the way these characters look. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned kind of like the underground counterculture, or, you know, you could even think about like the art culture or maybe the club culture from like a city like New York, or even I saw this kind of like living in South Florida, like this type of style of clothing, you know, different eclectic looks where it looks kind of city or, you know, even kind of trashy, but still cool. You know, if you were into goth or punk, you kind of know what I'm talking about with the design of these characters. And that's why I love the way that they look. You know, the art style and the character design is really goes to like the underground and the independent route. This is my favorite character of them, the Rose the puppet. She's the leader. She's the one that actually bites the main character of Alex. And for my issue of Crimson, my original issue of Crimson that I have, she's on the cover, and I got Humberto Ramos to actually sign it for me, because that's how much I enjoy the character and his art style and his inspiration that he gave to me as a character designer. So over here you get to see Alex's love interest slash the woman who's also hunting him. You got Red Hood, and you get to see his actual family. So, you know, George Elder, Linda Elder, and his little sister Priscilla. And with the other books, both Battle Chasers and Danger Girl, you actually only get character designs, but this one you actually get to see some actual pages from Humberto Ramos. So he was rocking and rolling on this already. And this stuff looks amazing, you know. Just from seeing the pencils here, this is almost exactly like the real pages that we get that are shown later on. And what I mean almost exactly, I mean that, you know, sometimes when an artist does their pencils and someone else is doing the inks and the colors, it doesn't look as accurate as the original pencils, but this is pretty accurate. So I'll have to look and see. I don't remember if Ramos actually did the inks on his book, but this is pretty close. And, you know, hats off to either him or the inker, because they didn't lose any of this great aesthetic. And I remember the creation story from that book looks very close, very well done, very well shaded. And likewise, the official scene where Alex gets bitten and attacked by the jelly bats, that's pretty much, that's it. You know, like I said, once again, very good in the way the characters look and the shading. Ramos is one of the masters of his craft. I appreciate seeing these classic pages just in pencil. So now we've moved on to the Danger Girl portion of this sketchbook. And Danger Girl is the book that I enjoyed the most. It is the one I had the most fun with. And I become a big Danger Girl fan. I have a lot of not only the original books, but some of the other spin-off graphic novels, as well as the art book, both in digital form as well as the hardcover format of the book. And we will go through that sketchbook at another time. Starting off with the main character of Danger Girl, that's Abby Chase. She is the quintessential Danger Girl, kind of an adventurer, almost like a combination of Indiana Jones and James Bond, going out on adventures and stealing artifacts. So her character was meant to be almost kind of like the every girl. She's the intro, or the window character, I should say. And they wanted her to be very versatile. So they kept her very simple, but still very appealing to the eye, so the fans would enjoy her. Now, the other two girls, the other two main Danger Girls, Natalia and Sydney, they were allowed to be a little bit more, how do you want to say, colorful in that regard. You know, Natalia is like the Russian assassin type, and she's a master of using knives and stabbing weapons, and she's probably the most hard ass of the two. And then you got Sydney, who's more on the other side of the spectrum. She's more fun loving. She wears the leather outfit. She has the leather whip, and she looks more like a classic Bond girl. Like, that's why I think they put her on the cover. She was kind of like one of the selling points for Danger Girl, and that they were going to do like a James Bond, Charlie's Angel type team, and she was kind of like one of the main characters. Probably, I think, one of the first characters he actually came up with in designing Danger Girl. So here we have some of the other heroes and villains in Danger Girl. You got Silicon Valerie. She's like the person in the chair, or the person at the computer. She's their techie member of Danger Girl. And you got Johnny Barracuda, who's kind of like the American agent. And he's the typical American. He's extremely arrogant. He gets all the ladies like James Bond. And what I liked about that character is he's kind of silly, but he's also very capable. So he's not a buffoon to the point where he screws up. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been real easy to make him a character that is always like losing or falling down or whatever. He's actually very capable in the book, and I appreciated that. My favorite character out of the Danger Girl is Agent Zero. He's basically their version of Snake Eyes, but he's also like he's like a ninja who's a master of disguise. I like characters like that. I thought he looked extremely cool, and looking like the Diabolique character from those classic spy comics. And of course, you got the leader of Danger Girl, the character of Deuce. And he's, the old spy who he basically was James Bond, if you remember the preview from Danger Girl. But now he's a lot older, and he has decided to run this group, who is always kind of like, he's like basically the Charlie of these angels. Getting on to the villains of Danger Girl, they are also one of my favorite aspects, and I can tell that J.Scott Campbell and Andy Hartnell, who's the co-creator of Danger Girl, that they were fans of G.I. Joe, because a lot of these villains within the Hammer have analogs within the group of Cobra that came from G.I. Joe. So you got, the mad scientist character who's kind of like Dr. Mindbender. You got Major Maxine, who's kind of like, I almost guess you can say like he's almost kind of like their Serpentor, but he's really like a unstoppable force, kind of like Frankenstein / Darth Vader. Like, even when they write his dialogue, you can tell it's very much in the vein of a character like Darth Vader. And here we have some of the Hammer troopers. They have different aesthetics. They also have different clothing depending on like what environment they were in, or if they were, field soldiers, or they were soldiers that worked in tech. So just like Cobra, who had the different facets, the different troopers, the Hammer also had the same thing. They even had their own like little ninja group. There's one particular Hammer ninja known as Assassin X, who is basically like their version of Storm Shadow. And we have this treasure hunter villain, Donovan Conrad, who is a dead ringer for the Timothy Dalton version of James Bond. So he's kind of like a combination of the hero and the villain from all those spy movies from back in the day. We actually see him in the 0 issue of Danger Girl. So even before we get to the main story, he is the main villain that Abby has to defeat before we even get to our main plot. And over here, they had like the little schedule, and the schedule did hold for this. I don't remember any of these books being late for their first issue. Danger Girl came out first, Battle Chasers came out next, and then after that came Crimson. And I do remember very much at the time going to Kevin Smith's Silent Bob's Secret Stash and picking up these original Cliffhanger books. We definitely will be doing reviews for all 3 of the first issues of Cliffhanger, plus some of the other issues on our schedule for Comics Crazy Season 2. So be on the lookout for that. So that is the end of our flip through of the Cliffhanger 0 sketchbook from Wizard Magazine. Please join us here next week, where we'll be doing the very first issue of Savage Dragon, published by Image Comics and created by Eric Larson, one of my favorite comic book artists from this time period. Let me know what you thought of this episode. Let me know if you enjoyed Cliffhanger back then. Let me know if you enjoy seeing the conceptual artwork from these very popular artists at the time. And also let me know if there are any other artists that you want me to feature on here showcasing their conceptual work. Because I'm one of those people who is a fan of that type of art. I always like seeing art in its beginning stages and conceptual work and just raw pencils and shading. So for me, this is a treat, and I do like to collect this type of artwork from comic book artists. I do have a lot of it on my shelf, and if you request something, I'll see if I have it, and if I don't have it, I'll see if I can find it, and we'll continue on from there. Make sure you are here for new episodes by subscribing to this channel, and also make sure you go ahead and like this video. And if you want to support the channel, two of the best ways to do that are to go to my website at chriscrazyhouse.net, purchase some of my own creator-owned comic books. I also do coloring books as well. A brand new one should be coming out pretty soon for the springtime. And you can go to my Patreon, and that way you can watch the full version of the episodes here for Comics Crazy. I do a lot of editing for these, so I cut them down a lot for YouTube and maybe take a few things here and there out of them, so you get the full episodes on the Patreon. And all you gotta do is go there, subscribe to a tier, and you'll be able to watch them there. There will also be exclusive reviews and flip-throughs that I will not post on YouTube. Anyway, folks, thank you for joining me here, and I hope to see you next time on Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy. Peace.